Welcome everyone. Thanks to all participants and to our sponsor area, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. I'm Ravindra, the founder of the ASEAN Network. The ASEAN Network is a digital community of thought, business, and young leaders promoting the role of technology for good. We are providing knowledge through speaker series, webinar, and virtual conferences with topics related to AI, fintech, education 4.0, smart cities, robotics, and cybersecurity. For our third webinar, we have a great panel of speakers. They will share their perspective in their countries related to smart cities and tech for good. After, we will have a Q&A session, and at the end, 3 rounds of 3 minutes with a one-to-one networking session generated with an algorithm. Our first speaker is Mark Thomas from New Zealand. Mark is a strategist and smart cities expert and the founder of ServiceWorks, an international consultancy firm providing strategic counsel on city building and smart city application. He's also sitting on the boards of the Smart Cities Asia Advisory and the ASEAN New Zealand Business Council. Mark received also the Leadership Award for outstanding contribution towards building smart cities and is part of the top 50 most impactful smart cities leaders. Welcome, Mark. The floor is yours.
Ravindra, thank you very much. Thank you for your welcome. So, as Ravindra said, I've worked in the smart city space for a number of years, but let me maybe firstly start by defining the topic, because there's a bunch of us, right, who maybe are new to smart cities, and it really is just this idea of using technology in cities to help improve the lives of citizens. That's the definition I like the most. Don't worry about the tools or the applications. It's this idea, this opportunity of using this technology environment we have now to do a better and more effective and more sustainable job of solving the city problems that many of us, of course, are experiencing. And I'm going to talk during the session just briefly on some of the digital tools that can help community engagement in urban planning. It's not just planning these tools can help, it's really more broadly smart cities development. And I'm going to take a bit of a different approach to this idea of community engagement, as you'll see. And so the first thing we have to do, of course, when thinking about smart city opportunities is understand what the barriers are, what the roadblocks are. And the first roadblock and concern is often we're not sure what technology to use in cities because it's changing and evolving. Secondly, it's funding, which is always a problem, of course. Next, leadership. The civic leadership, your city leadership may not be that sort of tech familiar, and you don't need to be a technical specialist, but you do need to be open to new ideas. City decision making can be very challenging, with many of our cities still in silos. Transport does transport, planning does planning. The integration between the units is still challenging. And lastly, skeptical citizens who really aren't sure. They might have heard the term. And the term smart cities, can be a bit problematic, right? It can be a bit of a buzz phrase that people latch on rather than think about the underlying city problems and the role technology can play. So if we want to get citizens more involved, sure, engagement and communications is a key part of it. But what I want more cities to be doing is using tools that kind of give value to citizens. Some of the examples are on the screen. Firstly, on the top left, Van Connect, which Vancouver in Canada on the west coast is...
Sorry, Mark, to disturb you, but I think the slides didn't appear on the screen.
Right, so you can't see any
perfect.
slides?
Yes, now we can see it.
Great, fantastic. So just to recap, that was the roadblock I was talking about, that maybe you heard me describe but didn't see. Luckily, that's just the context, so the visual is less important. So now to what I call the new citizen hope, the opportunities to engage citizens. And Van Connect is an application that people in that city can use to report city problems. So if they see rubbish that is unattended, if they see a damaged footpath, if they see maybe someone who needs help, an emergency, you call the emergency services, of course, what they can do is take a photograph of that and they can report it to the council. It's obviously geo-connected, so they get the specific geographic reference, and then the citizen can stay connected to see if the city's going to solve the problem. And as we know, sometimes cities need a bit of encouragement to solve problems. Next is Antenno. So what that allows citizens to do is to be plugged into the information systems for cities. What I mean by that is you're in a street, you want to know maybe if someone's planning to do a redevelopment in your street. Maybe you want to know if someone's asked for an event permit to kind of close the street for an event. Someone wants to have a party and has made some request of noise control. So this is a way to engage citizens in terms of getting information to them from the council system, which many of us are pretty removed from. And then the third example, much more interactive, comes from the east coast of the US in Virginia, where they used a crowdsourcing tool to track data to help a storm sense project that they were doing. Living on the coast, they're susceptible to storms, and they wanted to work out what's the best location to place the sensors. And so they got citizens using an app to kind of be involved in terms of designing where best to put the sensors. And of course, they can stay engaged through the app in terms of reporting. So these are some examples, tangible examples that engage citizens more in city activities, but also give them a benefit, right, from the engagement. In a different light, we also have 3 other examples in Vienna. They have the VN mobile app, which was a few years old now, and it's one of the early examples of what's called mobility as a service. This is the idea of joining up the different ways you can travel around a city onto one platform. So maybe if we think about eBay, if we're familiar with the US marketplace, most countries have a marketplace where you can go for services. This is a marketplace for transport. And so rather than just take a train somewhere or take a bus somewhere or take an Uber or Lyft somewhere, you can actually plan your journey across maybe a couple of those different tools and get more engaged. In Singapore, in some of what are called the HDBs, the housing that they have in Singapore, this app has been made available, Smart HDB, which allows people to stay connected to their home when they're not there. That is, for example, if you leave the air conditioning on, you can get an alert about that. If someone needs attention, you can get an alert about that. And lastly, at the bottom, the own transport platform that my company's involved with in parts of China, which is the idea of connecting riders to ride-hailing services, but also looking at how we can develop an exchange for additional services. Because if we think about it, right, most of us are stuck in transit, whatever form that is, for some time each day. So there's a big opportunity to look at other services that we might want to purchase. Obviously, harder to do if you're on a bicycle or an e-scooter, but for those who are stuck on trains or buses, this is a way to kind of expand the marketplace for activities and get more engaged. So let's just think back of those roadblocks then. What I'm proposing going to deal with that? Is it simply the case of new apps to get people engaged? Of course it isn't. We need a much more comprehensive response. And so what the specific response that I've been working with cities on is along these lines. The top circle talks about data sharing on open APIs. That's making sure that your city lets more information flow more readily. Cities have huge amounts of data and information. They often keep it to themselves. And so having an open data policy, having an open API policy really is a very important part of wanting to become more citizen-led. You should also be encouraging your city and your mobile operators to try and do better and freer Wi-Fi, because that's still a big challenge in cities. Next, moving to the right, the idea of using vendor entrepreneur activist labs. Dealing with vendors is quite a challenge for many cities, and what we've got to do is get them connected up with entrepreneurs and citizens. So that's an unusual way of bringing these groups together in labs to collaborate. Vendors often have their product set that they just want to market to the city. Entrepreneurs have good ideas, things that they want to do. What cities should be doing is putting them together to see what value can come from that. That leads to a marketplace for smart solutions. So all these good ideas should be made available and shared so other cities can pick them up. Cities need to collaborate more. And what that should bring then to the left is this idea of the internet of collaboration. We've had the internet commercially for 30 years now. We talk about the internet of things, the internet of everything. We don't yet talk about the internet of collaboration. We haven't yet sort of developed the ability to create online marketplaces where we're sharing good ideas, and cities need to do that. And lastly, we've got, of course, new technology such as blockchain, which some call, the new internet. And of course, I'm not talking about cryptocurrency, which is, some would say blockchain's evil cousin. Blockchain is simply an online transaction system that allows you to very safely and securely undertake a whole range of systems and processes. And so cities like Singapore, countries like Dubai and Estonia are moving a lot of their government services there and actually making it easier for people to be more engaged and buy. If you want to buy a property, you go onto their blockchain property database to sort of see that kind of information. So what change has traditionally looked like in cities is this: people putting their hands up, right? That's what it looks like at town meetings often or on surveys. And in the digital age, we've often translated it to a digital version of that. We gather data, we might be even gathering it socially, but we haven't transformed enough. And what change has to look like now is this: giving more information and power to people and to their hands. And that way, we'll have a much greater opportunity for enabling community engagement and getting better cities for our citizens. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mark, for sharing how digital tools can enhance community engagement in urban planning. Let me introduce now to our second guest speaker, Chris Villanueva from the Philippines. Chris is a pioneer in the smart city space in the Philippines and internationally certified sustainability practitioner and the executive director and chief sustainability officer at Smart City. She's also a smart sustainable cities instructor with IoT Academy and International Telecommunication Union Academy. Chris' current commitment is to create a movement transforming how the world thinks, does, and plans smart cities in the Philippines and developing countries. Welcome, Chris. The floor is yours.
I'm Chris, and today I want to share about, why current smart cities and digital transformation are not really working in developing countries. So I guess Ravindra already mentioned my background. So my background really is in urban planning and project management and policy research, and as a smart sustainable city instructor. Okay. So about Smart City, Smart City is the first tech nonprofit in the Philippines, and currently our goal really is to create a movement which transforms the way we think, the way we do, the way we plan smart cities and communities, especially in developing countries like the Philippines. So, as I mentioned earlier, what I really want to discuss is why and how can we really move forward in terms of smart cities and digital transformation in developing countries beyond the hype. Mark mentioned earlier, that there's a lot of buzzwords, and what we really want is to sustain any smart city initiatives in our countries. So why and what and why smart city is. Well, we are made to believe that smart city is a new phenomenon, but in reality, the practice has been around for almost 4 decades already. So digital transformation in managing our local government, our communities evolved from digital cities when we have the local area network. Then after digital cities, it gradually developed into intelligent cities when the proliferation of the use of internet is there already. And now, of course, that we have more than half of the world population is using smart devices. We have smart city. So smart city is an innovative community that uses information, as mentioned earlier, information and communication technologies and other means to improve the quality of life of its residents. Well, again, I would say that it's undeniable. The digital transformation of communities, which is basically the merging of digital, the physical and socioeconomic layers of the society, can bring many immediate benefits in creating new jobs. It can create like new opportunities as well, new services. It can also boost, efficiency of the community and even promote innovation later on. But when it comes to improving the way we govern, the way we manage our communities, I have to say that the story is not that simple. The world is getting more and more crowded, and we are paying the price. So we have climate change, we have poverty, we have, a lot of like crimes as well, and a lot of insecurity. It may seem like reasonable and quite frankly a no-brainer. I would say it's a no-brainer to imagine introducing digital transformation and ICTs into the processes of the public sector and local governments. But I want to argue today that implementing and developing smart cities and digital transformation as tech for good is a complex problem, especially for developing countries. And it's good that I see here there's a lot of audience, there's a lot of people in the audience from developing countries. In fact, it can even do more harm than good. It can also waste, the country's already limited resources if not implemented strategically. But of course, I'm here to discuss as well. Later on, I will also discuss some ways wherein we can manage the issues. We can make those particular issues like manageable. So first, let us understand why few digital transformation projects or few digital transformation services in the Philippines doesn't really succeed. Well, even the World Bank itself released a report which concluded that almost 80% of all digital projects in the developing countries fail. Why is this alarming? Well, with the growing government technology spending, and which you can see here, and the limited resources and increasing debt that the developing countries have nowadays, failure rates of this government technology projects are therefore a major concern. So you'll ask me, so what's gone wrong in developing countries? What's gone wrong in the smart cities and the digital transformation projects in developing countries? First, is budget constraint and financing issues. Unlike the rich countries, the cost of smart devices, the cost of electricity consumption can be a barrier in terms of the buy-in or the uptake of the residents in developing countries like India. Another issue is the lack of technology-related infrastructure readiness. So likewise, in Ghana, costly internet connection services hinder the widespread adoption of Wi-Fi. Another major problem that we see in the practice of digital transformation and in the practice of smart cities in developing countries is the fragmented authority. So we all know how important data and we all know how important information for smart cities are. So a fragmented institutional mandate and the lack of coordination mechanisms across public services institution makes smart cities fail in developing countries. It can even cause security risks. And here are some of the smart city implementation that we've found in the Philippines. Here are few lists that we found in the country as well. And what we really found in our study, which we did in 2020, is that for far too long, the government and even the donors themselves treat smart city and digital services as a standalone technical engineering problem. So what do we mean by this is what Mark said earlier. We treat smart cities as a technology problem separate from the government policy and internal government processes. So that's why smart city exists, because what we realize is that the current smart city and the current digital transformation are too technology centered. They are too focused on already developed and rich communities, rich cities. They are not interoperable. They don't talk to each other. And it cannot be sustained beyond disasters. It cannot be sustained beyond, the change of leadership. So it makes us wonder, it makes us wonder, what can we actually do about it? First, I want to emphasize that we have nothing against technologies. We have nothing against apps. We agree in Smart City, we agree that adoption of technologies and apps are beneficial. And what we question here is our over-reliance to these, sexy buzzwords when it comes to digital transformation, when it comes to smart cities. So where should we, really begin? First, we need to assess the current status of our data sets, the current status of our technology system. So machine-readable data availability, the interoperability of technologies and data are not, so much of a concern in developed and rich countries. But we, as a developing country, coming from developing countries, are not there yet. Developing communities first need to assess the current state of their data and technology. Ask ourselves, does it really do they really talk to each other? Can we connect them with each other? And so that's why in Smart City, in my organization, we also offer, assessment tools and other services to do this. Another one that we believe at in terms of how we go forward is data literacy, not just data science. So what do we mean by this? We believe that the field of data should be inclusive. We believe that the field of data should be that there should be no single person, no department or organization should have a monopoly in terms of data. And we also believe that the field of data is far too important to be left out to data scientists. So what do we mean by this? So currently, we notice that there's a lot of activities. We have nothing against like hackathons. We have nothing against with accelerators. But we think that the resources should be the local communities and the local communities and our countries need to appropriate more resources for and in developing data, in developing digital and technological literacy of the citizens and the public sector. So we need to make people realize the value of data before anything else. So next that we want to push for is to merge the design and systems thinking. And what do we mean by this? We need to engage and consult with the public early in the process. Another one that we should do is that it was mentioned by the first speaker earlier is really having creating this openness culture. So open by default and free as in freedom. What do we mean by these? We need safeguards to ensure that the data, the technologies, the smart city services will be, and it will remain to be fair. It will uphold our freedom. It will be open. It will be interoperable, and it will be vendor independent. So with this, in order to make smart cities work for and with the people and the areas that need them the most, local leaders in developing countries and their donor partners require a long-term perspective. I have to emphasize that there are no shortcuts. We can't just acquire apps and say that we are already digitally transformed and we are already smart city. We need to conclude. I want to emphasize as well that the fundamental digital government reform and real smart city demand sustained effort. It demands commitments, and it demands collaboration, and it demands leadership over many generations. So I think that's it for me. If this is our contact number and contact information, if you have any questions later, I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing how smart cities practices need to be different in developing countries, and also the importance of data gathering, literacy, and community engagement. So our last speaker is Andre Kwok coming from Singapore. Andre has been entrepreneur since 2012 in Southeast Asia as a founder of Good City Foundation, a non-profit organization based in Hong Kong, providing development programs for city government in Southeast Asia. Good City Foundation is currently a member of the private sector committee of ASEAN Smart Cities Network and institutional partner of G20 Global Smart City Alliance. Andre is currently also serving in the working group of IoT and urban transformation in the World Economic Forum. Welcome, Andre. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear my voice. And again, thanks, Mafindra, for having me here. Thanks all the audience and friends from all around Asia. Any questions, feel free to drop in the comment box together and discuss. A little bit sharing of my organization and also some of the works or cases about smart city, probably very broad, and also we may share the cases, what we have done, mostly in ASEAN. I will keep it short and precise so that we can go to more discussions and questions moving forward together. Our organization as a nonprofit started in 2016. Our mission here, as we state here, is a movement as a nonprofit foundation, and also together with technology ventures. I believe Mark and also Chris have highly mentioned about how policymakers and technologists shall come together as a movement, cross generations, and basically is for all, being that the current digitization for smart city is very exclusive still, not inclusively for many emerging cities. So the vision that we state here is basically how an affordable digitization for cities can be happening in the coming years. So we set our goal, which is hopefully 100 cities. That is a very bold statement, but we aim to do that. I'm personally from Hong Kong, currently based in Singapore, but most of our work has been in Southeast Asia. And across Southeast Asia, we see three summarized problems or challenges that Chris has also mentioned a lot, which is including inconsistent master planning of cities, where cities basically have their own politics and also policies where not integrating and also not incorporating with each other, not really catering the need of technologies as well, where the next generation of policymakers And even political leaders find it very difficult to inherit and continue their better planning for the city. Many of the plannings are also inherited from the colonial age during the last generation of Southeast Asia. So all these lead to a lot of high inconsistency of problems in urban planning and city development. Weak understanding and also low awareness of technology governance is a problem. Younger generation are very aware of technologies, how mobile app works, and also the interactions. But the governance and also the importance of policies to make sure technology are put in good use is very low and also very weak in understanding. And lastly is the private sectors, especially many family business in Southeast Asia, especially traditional family business, are finding it very interesting market, smart city, how to engage, how to invest, and also how to partner at the end. So I believe the younger generations, like many audience here, would like to learn more how their own business can be transformed so as to be part of the movement together. And this is not just a Southeast Asian problem, but also global challenges that even mainland China, particular countries like Japan and many others are facing. So I believe the global movement is going to be very dedicated for full city digitizations. It's not just the privilege of first tier cities or capital city, but even more fifth and third tier cities in around their own countries, from nations like mainland China, where Jack Ma back in 2020 boldly state that there shall be 300 emerging cities in mainland China with 1 million population each will be facing a lot of digital transformations. So digital literacy, also many other technologies shall be getting ready by collaborations. And also to raise a specific case where we also have certain works in the Philippines that huge populations of Philippines are basically still facing underbanking issues. That is one very clear example how inequality happening itself among their own countries, that the citizens in, say, Metro Manila or just within Makati area are facing a relatively better technology advantage, but the population outside Makati or outside Metro Manila are facing high inequality of technology and also the access to technologies. It's not a technology problem then. It is actually a huge social problem that government shall come in together with the private sector. So that's where we come in. I mean, that's where we start seeing the opportunities at the same time as the foundations. When we were all at the university back then, we found it together with our colleagues from who used to work in investment banking and also in research field. As in foundations, we collaborate with many other organizations such as the World Bank, ADB, and local organizations like Indonesia Creative Cities Network to look into a lot of local challenges. Like Rafijan mentioned, we also work with regional platform like World Economic Forum and ASEAN to understanding how stakeholders dynamic really works. And we do hope also to leverage our voices over those kind of platforms. One very specific case I would like to share to everyone is I believe many ASEAN countries would face, which is the financial inclusions. And one example that we state here is the future of banking in the Philippines. It is a project we done in Manila back in 2019 when COVID is not happening that time. We conduct a capacity building workshop with the local stakeholders together with community Grameen foundations with Professor Yunus on exploring the banking and also how technology would bring in a more inclusive microfinance and also banking system infrastructure to the Philippines. It's basically over 70% of populations in the Philippines are underbanked, as they do not have access to the banking services. They have to walk, as you can see in the screen, the left corner. Many of the Filipino in suburban rural area have to queue up themselves in physical banks just to deposit cash daily or monthly, and they have to take up more than an hour to queue up and even travel there just to deposit or withdraw cash. So all these adding up together lead to many other problems, including all the transportation, for banking purposes would lead to huge carbon emissions because you are taking this extra mile to access the banking and also wasting a lot of economic manpower. That sort of residue or that kind of waste of time basically lead to a huge backlash of the economic contribution in the country like Philippines. So in the conversation we had at the end, we have identified one of the local stakeholders in the Philippines, which is a local financial technology company named called PearlPay, which has been digitizing rural banks by providing digital core banking solutions. I think the very amazing technology that it has been providing is, if we look at the landscape, the problem in the Philippines, the number of rural banks in the Philippines outnumber the commercial banks or conventional bankings in the Philippines. So basically, the network of rural banks become a major backbone and also the network for providing financial services. All the farmers and also the citizens have to go to the rural banks for financial products like loans and also even a little bit mortgages. And especially during COVID-19, when the government released the financial packages for subsidies, they have to go to the rural banks, but definitely is a headache because COVID-19 and also all these lockdown hinder people walking to the banks to access to the finance. So this is where the important technologies like PearlPay comes in, where they provide affordable core banking solutions to ensure that every rural bank gets transformed from simply using the paperback booklet like you see in the graphic here, everyone with the paper book to get the money, to be transformed into using mobile phone or feature phone. Even though we do not have internet access, you can use SMS to access the finance. And it's not just transforming every individual single users, but also the bank core system itself, that the data and also the accounts of the bank system can be migrated into cloud computing and so on. But definitely they also face a lot of challenges, not just the license or technology compliance, but also many cybersecurity and also the relevant policy to ensure to clear the way out to increase the commercial interest for all these kind of fintech and business can come together. So this is one of the cases that we have faced and also come across. And it's not just a single Filipino problem, but basically the neighbor Indonesia also faced similar challenge, and the market is 4 times bigger than Philippines. And also many other countries like Vietnam, Thailand, and Cambodia would face similar challenges as well. So we can see a very interesting and very exciting, but at the same time very worrying subsector of smart city transformation need here in the region like Southeast Asia. Another one I would like to highlight a bit further is heritage, sort of old houses, old buildings. Again, it's not just a single Indonesian problem. This is one of the cases we have done in Bandung City back in January 2020, right before COVID-19, where we developed a capacity program with the city government of Bandung, that they faced a lot of public finance challenge where the over 1,600 old buildings were heritage, and they have been burning tax revenue as the buildings are not generating revenue enough for them. So one of the case we have made with them at the end is deciding a strategy and also a digital master planning for the city to turn and also renew the old houses into sort of urban data lab and also facilities where they can accommodate digital companies and also servers and so on. So this is two examples, and we can definitely spend time to elaborate and expand further. We are also have been moving on because of COVID-19 that we can't fly a lot for these sort of projects. So we have been working closely with the World Bank and also the Forum on how to get more of our knowledge and also collaboration further to provide accessible knowledge and also accessible strategies for public policymakers and also city planner at the end. again, we can definitely explore and share more, but just a quick introduction.
Sorry, Andre, you still have 2 more minutes.
Thank you, sure. Access to all these knowledge for city governments and also policymakers. So I think I have roughly wrap up. This is the work and also the mission and the movement of the transformation of cities of our foundations, and happy to explore and also answer more questions from our experience. So that's pretty much from our side. And thank you, and pass the time back to Ravindra.
Thanks, Andre, for sharing a Good City Foundation purpose, vision and mission in ASEAN, and also sharing different case studies. Sadly, we're running out of time, so I will directly ask you a question. If you can answer briefly and concisely, it will be nice. That's why we allow time for our virtual networking session. So my question for you all is, the COVID-19 pandemic profoundly changed infrastructure's need in city centers. How can cities scale up urban technologies and infrastructures to become more livable and remain engines of productivity, innovation, and growth?
Ravindra, it's a big question. Shall I start? I'll just give three responses, because I'm sure Chris and Andre will have insights to share too. The most important thing is to let citizens in. Cities can't solve these problems by themselves, particularly because cities don't even know what the emerging tech solutions are. And so the comment I made about having an open data network that citizens can engage with, and that needs to relate to the city situation, of course. Some will be more capable than others. But if you can't have easy open data networks, then run labs, run hackathons, run other tools that work for your community to get the citizens helping to solve the problems to that big question. Secondly, cities have to create much more effective ways to engage the private sector. You know, there's this some cities shut down from dealing with vendors because they're just sick and tired of the LinkedIn requests from vendors or whatever it is. So there's got to be a more productive way to let the private sector help solve city problems. And lastly, and I know this is, the last thing people want to think of when we're in the middle of a pandemic, we've got to continue to focus on the and. Even when we're in the middle of all these crises, there's a big opportunity here for us to kind of do different things. Mobility is my area. Many cities I know have, because of social distancing, made some innovations in the roads and pavements they would never have done normally. So we've got to keep focusing on the end. What else can we do to help get us closer towards answering that question? Thanks, Rhonda.
Chris?
Yeah. Well, from my end, I will tell a little bit of story. So I guess I'll tell a story about this particular app, like a ride-hailing app, which tried to enter like the several LGUs. It's a ride-hailing app for I think tricycle. So tricycle is basically an informal way of transportation in the Philippines. But the thing is, they adopt it. Then suddenly, when they try to implement it, they realize that they don't have the maps on the ground. So how can this particular technology, or how can this particular app be implemented like efficiently if there's no data sets on the ground? So from my end, with that, we have to realize that, as mentioned by Mark earlier, that we need to push for open data. We need to make sure that the data sets is on the ground. So that's number one. Number two, that I want to put emphasis is, we need not to think about it as scaling up, but we need to think about it as sustaining. This digital transformation, this digital projects has been going on since, I don't know, like in the Philippines, like since 2004. And yet, it's already 2021 and it's not being sustained. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we really sustain it? We need to get the buy-in of the citizens, as Mark said. The apps itself cannot function on its own without the buy-in and without the users from the ground. So that's the second one. And the third one would be we need to see the urban technologies, this digital transformation as not a technology problem, as not a technological solution that needs to be put right away. We need to see this as a more holistic approach wherein the government policies should be there as well. The interoperability policy should be there as well. In the Philippines, there's no open data policy. In the Philippines, there's no data governance policy. In the Philippines, there's no, and even in developing countries, there's no, there's no data sharing, like policy agreement. So, that's the ones, like, we really need not to think about scaling up, but, so how can we really think about how can we really sustain this urban technologies and this digital transformation? That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. How about you, Andre?
Well, I think one key nature of COVID-19 impact is COVID-19 basically constrain the way people move and also constrain the way people live. So I think that the productivity measurements nowadays would be what we used to question one last year. With the COVID-19 continues, how would there be still a concept like CBD thing, Central Business District? Let's say in Hong Kong, I mean, the Central Business District is definitely in central area or Wan Chai. People who live in, new territories or suburban area, they always, before COVID-19, they have to travel all along to central to work. And now COVID-19 impact us, and we all stay at home, work from home. And also in Southeast Asia, people even move from capital cities back to their hometown to live. So there's a huge change of demographic, like the second tier, third tier cities suddenly face a huge increase of manpower, and the government would feel confused or feel lost how they should handle such a surge of manpower. But they cannot directly consider them manpower because in some sense they become a burden to the government as well. So I think this is one big nature of COVID-19 and how to really keep cities more scalable and lively. And I think definitely it's going to be the way we see the networking of infrastructure. That is, it is no longer centralized to a certain area, but it's going to be very decentralized, not just in the digital network, but also in the physical space. It's going to be very decentralized. So I think Singapore has been taking some way to do that. They are building up new sub-towns in the country itself, so that people don't have to travel all along the way to, like, people who live in the north doesn't have to always travel to Marina Bay in the south just to make a living or just to get a good job. I mean, even though at the end it may be a problem still, people want to get a banking job, they have to go to the south. But I think there will be the trend that the policies, the government, or even the business owners have to consider whether they should set up the business in somewhere not very popular and create their own circle of economy for getting all these new change. I think the way everyone consider about infrastructure, human networking would be the key.
Thanks, Andre, for sharing your view on these questions. So now we will start our 2 rounds of 3 minutes for our virtual networking sessions. And you can discuss or debate about this question: how can we make cities more sustainable? Have a nice virtual networking event and see you after. Thank you.